Hi gang, Rob here. It is the afternoon of 21 September 2019. It is a beautiful day in Northeast Indiana. Just low 80s today, mostly sunshine. We got a little cloud cover rolling in for the evening. The wind's laying down. Gonna be a nice one tonight. Hey, today I've got installment 2.0 of Geezer Rants on the TheApostleP channel. Yeah, we're talking about the millennials today. How did you like the clickbait title? I think it should say Geezer Rant 2.0, Millennials, the worst generation in history. But guess what? That is not the thesis for this video. But I did want to get you to watch, and I wanted to see how responsive my beloved trolls are. I wanted to see how many of them would comment with venom before they've even watched the video. So yeah, it's a popular school of thought among crusty, geezerish, conservative Americans. Millennials, the most worthless generation in history. We like to make fun of them on one hand, don't we? We're amused by their leisure pursuits. They think beer isn't worth drinking if it wasn't brewed in a microbrewery and says IPA on the label. I think it's interesting that little breweries across the Midwestern United States produce a product called India Pale Ale. But it's no more funny than making a lager in Milwaukee. We think they dress funny. We're puzzled by the fact that they wear flannel and have full beards and live in cities and have never seen the woods, much less felled a tree, chopped wood, or built a fire. We think their music is odd. We think it's rather sad that they don't ride motorcycles anymore. Heck, they don't even really want to own cars. They do this thing called ride sharing, and they take Ubers everywhere. They've never rebuilt a carburetor or changed a spark plug or swapped an engine or built a hot rod. They just have no idea. They prefer soccer to baseball, and they watch football games, not to see which team wins, but which one of their fantasy players has good numbers. It's odd. It's strange. We can't make sense of it. We laugh about it. And then there are the more concerning aspects of the millennial generation. Things we used to know that were black and white, right and wrong, cut and dried, they don't seem to understand. We used to know communism was bad. We knew that married couples raising families who stayed married were good. The married couples were a man and a woman. Wow, we thought that borders were good. It puzzles us, it concerns us, geezers, that these self-evident truths no longer seem to be true for this new generation. All true, but it doesn't make the millennials the worst generation or the most worthless generation in history. In fact, these things, although the details are different, make them exactly the same as every other generation who was between 18 and 30. Every single one. Yeah. Mankind was created to go through a period of rites of passage, a period of coming to adulthood in which their brains were seemingly programmed to question the status quo, to take a hard look at everything the older generations saw as resolved and start from scratch to some degree, to figure things out for themselves. Now, on the one hand, This is part of our human DNA, part of our genetic programming that is essential for mankind to progress, to innovate, to make our existence on this little spinning sphere better as time goes by. If we always did what we always did, we would always get what we always got. It's a wonderful thing that our young people of every generation are programmed to question. But that wonderful thing has a dark side. It has a black side of the coin. And it's not necessarily the fault of young people. Now, I know where some of you think I'm going to go with this, right? I'm going to talk about a rebellious heart, and I'm going to talk about the fact that we're all born sinners, and it's absolutely true that young people who do not know the Lord and don't know Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior are going to rebel sinfully against godly appointed figures of authority in their lives. I'm not going there. I believe it. Most of you might not. And I'm not going to let this conversation hinge on that fact. But here's what I will say. At some point in the lives of lots of young people in every generation, the credibility, the truthfulness, the wisdom, the expertise of their parents, their trusted educators, starts to wane. They start to see things differently, and then here's where it gets really dark. There are forces of evil in this world, and they're not between the ages of 18 and 30 in any generation. They're older people. They also rebel against the status quo, but they don't do it. They don't do it for inquisitive, ingenuous reasons. Ingenuous meaning a desire for ingenuity. They do it because they're plain evil. They try to use the rebellious nature of the current generation of youth against mankind as a whole. How do they do that? Why do they do that? Well, they do it because they're evil. And how they do it is pretty easy. They start off by telling these inquisitive, rebellious youth with active minds and imaginations and a desire to make things better. They tell them things that at first confirm their rebellion. And then they lead them down a path away from the wisdom of those who love them to a path of evil. What am I talking about? What do you mean, Rob? Well, here's what I mean. Let's look at the last century or so in cultures where people's revolutions were begun, where movements of better by the collective notions caught hold. These ideas were, in every case, spawned by not people 18 to 30, people who were already firmly in adulthood who desired absolute power and riches. What am I talking about? Oh, I don't know. The Communist Revolution in China, Russia, the Nazi Party in Germany, the Fascist Party in Italy, and even as my dear friend Peter, the half Persian, half European atheist with family ties to Iran, reminded me, Rob, even the Arab Spring started this way. Evil men who desired absolute power touched the heartstrings of a rebellious youth culture, whipped them up to a frenzy, and enlisted them to help execute their evil plans. Oh, I forgot one, didn't I? Yeah, the socialist movement in the United States, which is about 50 years old or so and gaining strength. There are a whole lot of old white guys who are telling them that socialism leads to utopia. We old guys know, we conservative old guys who have no desire for absolute power that lies in a dictatorship in our society, we know that these things always lead to that. They never lead to utopia. But we're having a bit of a tough time getting our message across to this generation that we love and bring them back to the path of wisdom and patriotism and a knowledge of the exceptionalism of the American system, adherence to the principles contained in our founding documents. There has been no better idea. In 240 years, there has been no better idea. But a large number of our millennials don't know that. So where does the responsibility lie to change this? It lies with us. We can make fun of them, we can ridicule them, or we can try to figure out how to communicate with them to regain their trust, to share with them the wisdom of people who have lived before them in a way that opens their minds and not alienates them. It's a challenge we all face. I kind of thought it was a no-brainer in the knife community. I just assumed that most people who found their way to the knife community, even in the millennial generation, were probably freedom-loving weapons guys. Well, I've found that that's not the case. It kind of grieves me some days. But we each have a responsibility, those of us who are old and have learned the painful lessons of life that come with a rebellious youth. I used to hear old people say, when I was a 25-year-old, I used to hear them say things that I thought were absolutely stupid. And then I'd hear them talk about coming of age in their own lives. And I knew a guy very well who I came to respect a great deal. And he said, you know, the older I got, the smarter my father got. You know, there is sort of a natural coming back together that happens when the current generation reaches that magic age of 30 or somewhere around there. And this current generation will make that same change. I know I did. The rebellion starts to quiet, and we reconnect with the wisdom that we rejected. It might be true that this generation is a little different. It might be true that the rebellion reaches such proportions that the reconnection doesn't happen, and that's what concerns us all. So, old wise guys, ladies, figure out how to connect. Figure out how to communicate. Figure out how to become influencers in the lives of the millennials in your life. And millennials, some of the responsibility lies with you too. Ask yourselves, when people you don't know who are way older than you hit your hot buttons, get you fired up about things you're already thinking about, and enlighten you with an agenda that sounds different than the one your parents brought you up with. Be suspicious. Be wary. Does it make sense? Does it make sense that people you've never met have a set of values and a system of wisdom diametrically opposed to the system of wisdom you were raised with, does it make sense to follow that direction? Or is it possible, in fact probable, that the truths that were instilled in you or attempted to be instilled in you by the people who love you most are the best for you? Don't reject those people out of hand. They conceived you. They came alongside you when you were young. They brought you up because they loved you. They taught you the wisdom of people who came before, and they cared about the outcome. Does Bernie Sanders care about the outcome in your life? Elizabeth Warren? Donald Trump? They don't care. There are people, though, who love you. Don't discount their wisdom without having a conversation. Present those people with things you've been hearing that conflict with what they say. Don't write off the entire decade of your 20s. Don't write them off in the entire decade of your 20s and follow paths that are unwise and lead to destruction that are presented to you by people who don't really have your best interests at heart. So I'm interested to see in the comments, guys, your thoughts on this topic. Ideas about how we can, if we're a part of this older generation, how we can connect in a meaningful way with the millennial generation. I'm interested in hearing from millennials. What is it that we old folks do that annoys you, that makes the communication lines shut down? And how can we open solid, productive lines of communication? I want to hear your thoughts, guys. That's all for this one. Grace to you and peace from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Remember, the word is sharp.